Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be talking to you again about this book, Something's Missing, Identifying the Startup Within. And today I want to talk a little bit about abusive relationships and really in the context of setting effective boundaries and making sure that you don't find yourself in an abusive relationship. And if you do, then how to get out of it by setting effective boundaries. So first thing you have to do is identify it. And so in the context of all the things that have been happening really for the last 400 years to Black folk in America, you might ask, well, why is he talking about abusive relationships? I thought the book was about startups. Well, first of all, abuse is not just physical. It's mental, it's emotional, financial. There's all different types of abuse because really abuse is simply abusive relationship is really based on an inappropriate use of power, right? And using that power to manipulate behaviors and things of that nature. And so what we have to do is get really sensitive to when that's happening to us or when we are actually doing it to someone else and make the necessary adjustments. So I just want to talk a little bit about it. And I want to put it in the context of some of the things that have been going on in the last, really, like I said, 400 years, more specifically 8 years, and then most recently in the last 3 or 4 weeks with some of the shootings that have been happening. And so we just want to be clear about where I'm coming from as a Black man in America and trying to make a way for myself and feed myself and my family. I definitely want to make sure that that's the perspective that I present here. And I want to make sure that it's clear that I'm including anyone who is being abused. However, I'm really talking about what we are experiencing as a people. You have some folks that actually think that social media isn't the place to discuss certain issues that are going on, and they want to tell people to be careful what they post on social media. And of course, I agree with that, but I also know that it's a platform, and I think we would be remiss as Black men, if we did not speak out about what's going on in our communities and take some accountability and responsibility for making the necessary adjustments. And so I'm going to talk about it from a solution-oriented perspective because that's how I am and that's what I believe in. And so in the book, of course, I talk about why that's important in the business context, but it's important in every aspect of our lives. Because if you allow people to abuse you in any way, in any type of relationship, then it will bleed over in some way to another type of relationship. So you just have to be really, I think we as a country, we as probably a planet and a world have to be more sensitive to what abuse looks like, what it feels like, and make the necessary adjustments. So I'm going to make a statement, and it's going to be at the macro level. And here's my statement. I believe that Black America is in an abusive relationship has been in an abusive relationship with white America at the macro level for 400 years. And I'm going to talk a little bit about why I believe that. I'm not going to get too deep into it because I think that we can look at the data and it's pretty clear. Physically, we know physical bondage was a part of that. Emotionally, the just degrading of the character and the true nature of just the humanness of Black folks in America is purely dehumanizing us from a mental and emotional standpoint. And then financially, the systemic racism that persists today, and particularly even in startups and not being able to get venture capital and trying to force Black people to not partner with other Black people or make sure they have some white people on the team so they can get funding, things of that nature. All of that is systemic racism and it's abuse. And so we need to do something. We need to make the necessary adjustments to be successful in all of that. So obviously I'm not an expert on, domestic violence. If you are experiencing that, I think you should call a hotline and get out of it immediately. But this is really about, at a macro level, about just making sure we are making the right decisions from an abuse standpoint, from a setting effective boundaries standpoint. So I think that's the first step, is you have to be able to set effective boundaries. This way you actually can acknowledge, number one, that you are in an abusive relationship. But here's my statement. I think I said that Black America has been in an abusive relationship with white America for about 400 years. And it persists today because I think we, number one, have never set effective boundaries. And so what caused us to not set effective boundaries? And that's the abuse itself, right? So that's the kind of the self-perpetuating aspect of abuse, is it takes away your ability to set effective boundaries. So if one day you are kidnapped and enslaved and beaten, and anybody that tries to set an effective boundary or stand up for him or herself is killed and mutilated or embarrassed in front of everybody else, and terrorizing people in that way, then I think people get to the point where they do not want to set effective boundaries, right? They don't know how. And so your ability to defend yourself becomes weakened, right? Just like your immune system, right? So if you're not fighting off these abusive tactics, then you're letting them in, and they're corrosive. And so there's a cycle of abuse. I think everybody's aware of it. Starts with, tension building and, things going on in the community. If you notice over the last 8 years, a lot of the rhetoric, the birthers for Obama, the, just effigies, the name calling, going after the first lady, just completely disrespecting the presidency. And of course, some of those things happen with other presidents, but I think most reasonable people can acknowledge that this has happened to an extreme degree in this case. And we also know that for the last 8 years, there's been a lot of race baiting and causing folks to uprise and feel like that Black people, Hispanic people, and Muslims, everybody's taking America from white people, as if America wasn't taken from Native Americans by white people. So I think that we really need to get really serious and have a real serious discussion, even if it's just Black folks amongst ourselves, about this abusive relationship and how we rectify it. So step one, obviously, the tensions building, cycle of abuse. Then there's some sort of incident, Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, Emmett Till, whatever, right? Tamir Rice. These things are happening. And then emotions get high. And one of the reasons why I've been absent for a while, and I apologize, is because my emotions were high and everybody's emotions were high. And it was a bad time to really get out and put something on video and say these things. I had to collect myself. And so I'm saying to you now that this is a problem. All lives matter, but Black lives matter less as it pertains when you look at the justice system and what's happening. And we need to make sure that we are equal, that our lives matter just as much as everyone else's, and really look at the data and make the appropriate decisions. So number one, tensions. Then you have an incident. Number two, and then here's the part that concerns me the most, and this is the dangerous part of, aside from the incident itself and the whole cycle, the part that I think Black folks are unfortunately conditioned to continue to participate in is this reconciliation period, where the abuser apologizes in some, way, shape, or form, regardless of the level of sincerity. And when someone is sincere in their apology, they make real strides to not do it again, and they own it. And so we need to, and here's how you know that's not happening, because then if they're not sincere, then they will give excuses, they blame, or in some extreme cases, they even deny that it occurs, right? Or they say it's not as bad, and they look for data. If you look at all the newspaper, there's always folks out here saying that what we're experiencing in this country is not actually happening, and that somehow we're making it up, and it's ridiculous. It's written out of the history books, and everything you read or hear about white people in history or whatever is, you know, positive, and black people just haven't contributed anything. And I think somebody said that at the Republican National Convention, which is just the level of disrespect and frankly ridiculousness is gotten out of control. So that's one level. So that reconciliation that we continue to do, because we feel like, oh, the ideals of uh, integration, although we never really fully experienced it, are something that we were sold back in the civil rights movement, and they aren't working, and we're not willing to own that this isn't working, and that we really need to figure out how do we fully integrate. And the first step to doing that is sort of self-love, and which means that we actually have to extract and pull ourselves out of the abusive relationship, and really get a true level of independence. And only after you have self-love and independence and a strong community can you actually effectively engage in a relationship, just like on a personal level. Anybody that has personal issues so deep that they're constantly coming up, they're not going to be able to maintain an effective relationship. And so our issues as a community are so deep, with us killing ourselves. That's a fact. What's going on in Chicago is atrocious. And we gotta get past this foolishness on that level too. So we definitely need to be accountable there. But regardless of what's going on in Chicago, that doesn't give a police officer or anyone the right to kill innocent, unarmed Black people or hold court in the street, because that means that they're no different than what's going on in Chicago. And furthermore, I don't believe that we're getting a fair shake in the justice system beyond that, because these cops, less than 1% of the police are being indicted. But Black people that kill each other, when they're caught, they do get indicted. They go to prison, and we further the cause of the prison industrial complex. So we can't. That disparity is a problem, and it's also part of the abuse, right? And the incident is sort of forgotten, and we get very calm, and we go back to, shopping and living our lives, and really just making sure that me, my four, no more are okay. And that behavior, I think I'm going to correct myself, is probably the most dangerous, because that's the setup for the next cycle of abuse, is assuming that everything has gotten better. And of course, that's called the honeymoon phase. And I think we got to really get out of that. And so I've already sort of given away the ghost. I think the first step is setting effective boundaries. And that comes with just acknowledging that we're in an abusive relationship, or in general, acknowledging your own feelings, your own preferences, your own desires. And that is really the first step to being in a healthy relationship of any kind. What is it that I need and want out of life, regardless of if I have a job or if I don't have a job, if I am in a relationship, if I'm running a business, or at the macro level in this country? What is it that I really want and need to feel comfortable in my own space and in any space? And then once we accept and figure that out and be honest with ourselves about what we really need or want, then only then can we begin to start communicating that to other people, which is part two. Communicate what you need and want to yourself and to the next person, whether that's your boss or your business partner or the federal government or the local government or your partner. And that's a really important step. And sometimes that actually is just the distance between knowing what you want and communicating what you want is what causes the tension to build. And then when you do communicate it, it becomes an incident. And beyond that, they start the cycle. So I think that part right there, you're in an abusive relationship if you can't do that part effectively. And I know that if you find that you cannot communicate to your business partner, your romantic partner, the federal government, whoever it is, in a way that actually moves the ball forward, and then you know it's time to extract. And so I keep talking about extracting at a macro level. How would Black people extract from America? What does that mean? Well, I've seen memes that are saying, "Well, we shouldn't leave. We built this place," and I think we're absolutely right. They certainly owe us for what we've done, and all the other countries in the world that owe us from what we've done, what America built off free labor, and particularly the textile industry in Europe. So, and all that cotton we picked, or our ancestors picked. So I think that we really need to start thinking about money and business, and not just from I want to start my own business perspective, but from I want to be in control of my own destiny, and I want to contribute to my community, so that our community can be in control of its own destiny. So again, it starts at the micro level with decisions about where we spend our money, where we make our money, where we invest our money, and being really deliberate about that. And I think that's really important. We need more businesses. Black people are still unemployed. For the last 60 years, have been unemployed at a rate twice that of white Americans, since before the civil rights movement. So I really do think that ownership is a really big part of it. And that's my next step. At what point do you have to, part three is you have to own that this relationship is not allowing you to be you in it. And sometimes that's work. When you're at work and you can't seem to be your best self at work, it's time to move on. And that, again, this goes for any kind of relationship. I'm really disappointed in what's been happening in the country and a lot over the last 3 weeks, particularly over the last 8 years. But I also knew that this would happen. So I can only be so disappointed. I really wanted to come before you today and talk to you a little bit about it. So we talked about, number one, acknowledging that we've been in an abusive relationship, acknowledging our fears and our and what's happening in the relationship, acknowledging what we need to be healthy. And then we talked a lot about recognizing when boundaries have been crossed, and that's a really important point in communicating that to your partner or the person that offended you. And unfortunately, again, we talked about that being that setting off the boundary. And that's exactly what happens, right? If we say Black Lives Matter, then somebody else says all lives matter. And this is the kind of rhetoric and the kind of foolishness that keeps the cycle going. And so I'm proposing that we create step 4, which is silence. And I know not the kind of silence that is betrayal, because we certainly need to be sharing and speaking out and posting things as they're going on and making sure that we are doing the best we can to force people to acknowledge what's going on. But I don't believe that that's actually solving the problem in and of itself. I think we need to expose it. But the next step is we don't need to get so emotionally wrapped up in the individual incidents that happen. They're awful, they suck, and we need to figure out a solution. But honestly, the solution is the problem is so systemic that there's no one thing you can do today to make the system better. Now, if you want to stop police brutality, all you have to do is start locking people up and holding police accountable to the same degree that you would someone who attacked a police officer. So if we were to do that, then that part would immediately stop. But the truth of the matter is, as heinous of an issue that police brutality is, we still would have an abusive relationship in America, and we still would be under the thumb of the justice system, the financial system, and and even at work. So um, this is a real topic. I've taken some time to really think about it, decide whether I want to even lend my voice to it, and I think I do because that's who I am. And I really wanted to talk to you a little bit about it. I know I'm supposed to be coming to you each week, but this whole thing has just really had me really wound up, and so I did want to come to you and make those statements. So I think what I mean by silence, let me just really clear that up, is not that we should not say anything, because that's awful, right? And that's betrayal. But I do think that once we share it, once we get it out there and it's known, that's only part of the process. And that all the while, we should not be, while the tension is building in the calm, right? The best time to clean your boat or paint your boat is when it's in a low tide, right? So once we get to that calming stage, which I think we're probably approaching now, until somebody else gets killed, then we actually need to start working on systemic solutions that attack the systemic problems. And that is patient, that requires love and commitment and sacrifice and a willingness to maybe have a little less or invest instead of purchasing, right? But really get focused on solutions that are long-term and sustainable. Um, and so again, we're building the FOSSI for that reason, so that people can engage on that level, and communicate for the sole purpose of having solutions. The link for that is cite.nafasi.co. So if you want to engage in that conversation, definitely join our community. And we're posting constantly, sharing things about startup community, about business community. Also, how can we use social entrepreneurship to solve some of these problems? But it requires a method to our madness. It cannot just be emotion driven. And again, that's why it's taken so long to even come back to you. So I only do this because I love you guys. I love everyone that is passionate about trying to solve these problems. So it doesn't matter what ethnicity you are or orientation. I'm just not interested in that. I'm really interested in providing effective solutions. And I think that's going to also require that we connect globally and not just treat ourselves as minorities here in America, because we're actually not a global minority. And so we need to really leverage the fact that we're not a global minority and engage the global African and Latino and global diaspora in a conversation about what's going on here in America and across the world. So with that, again, we'll go over these steps. 1, acknowledge that you're in an abusive relationship. Acknowledge that you have boundaries, you have preferences. Figure out what those things are. Be honest with yourselves about them. Number 2, get to the point where you can communicate effectively. And that's the litmus test for being in an abusive relationship. If you're not communicating effectively what your boundaries are, then you're as much part of the problem as the other person. If you can actually say, here's what I need, here's what I want, and here's what I would like you to do, and here's where a pathway I think we can move forward. If you can get to that point and you still can't get through, then that's when you definitely have to cut bait. And so part 3 is figuring out how to move out of that relationship. So once you set effective boundaries, what does that mean? How do you get out? And then number 4 is really getting out. But you have to have a plan, and I don't know that we have a real plan, because in the end we are focused on we're too individualistic in our thinking. And we're very fragmented, and that is a house divided against itself cannot stand. But also, without a vision, the people perish. So we actually have to see ourselves in an effective relationship with ourselves and with others first. And so with that, I'll leave you. But again, another thing, if you want to participate in a focus group for the book, inbox me, and we'll go through the opportunity to do that in a virtual way. So definitely hit me up, inbox me on Facebook or Twitter. Reach out to me on Facebook or Twitter and let me know if you want to participate in a focus group. That's something that we're really excited about doing, because we're going to be doing workshops to help people transition out of their career into what we call a purpose-driven startup, and that is a big part of what the book is about and what Nafasi is about and the community that we're trying to build. So we definitely want, if you are interested in figuring out how to get out of your current job and into a different career or owning your own business, particularly owning your own business, then we would like you to join our focus group. So definitely hit me up on Facebook or Twitter if that's the case, and I will talk to you very soon. Thanks.